Okay, marathon training is all about maximizing your potential without overloading your body. What I see from a lot of runners is they're preparing to last the distance, to run the 42 kilometers or 26 miles. And what they're not preparing for is to run that at their race pace, at their intended marathon pace. What I'm going to share with you in this video is 5 key training sessions to help prepare you to run your fastest marathon. And we're going to work on the pace of 2:48, 4 minutes per kilometer. Now, these aren't your average marathon training sessions. They're not only going to boost your confidence, but they're also going to simulate marathon day for you. What I realized when I started marathon training and I did my first couple of marathons was I was so fearful of the distance, I was just preparing to survive the distance and get to the finish line. What I was actually doing is becoming a very good slow runner for long periods of time. When I switched to this type of session, I went from running 4 hours 25 for the marathon to quickly running 3 hours 25 to marathon and then running 2 hours 37 for the marathon. Huge difference. So here are 5 great marathon training sessions that use no more than 25 kilometers of total volume, no more than 16 miles of total volume, excluding your warm up and cool down. Session number 1, marathon race progression. Now, 25 kilometers of volume, first 10 kilometers is marathon pace plus 10%. So if we're working on a 2:48 marathon, and that's 4 minutes per kilometer, plus 10% would be 24 seconds. So we're running that first 10K at 4 minutes and 24 seconds. The middle 10 kilometers is exactly at marathon pace. So no rest or recovery in between, straight into it and straight into that marathon pace. So we're doing 10 kilometers at exactly the same pace. We're using the body in exactly the same way that we want to attack the marathon, which is the future goal. The final 5 kilometers is at half marathon pace. And that's usually about 10 to 15 seconds faster than your half marathon pace. So we're probably finishing those final 5 kilometers in 3:50 or 3:45 pace. What that's going to do for you is build a lot of strength and also get you finishing fast. So getting you into that body and also mentality that is able to switch it up in the second half, go quicker, which is extremely motivating when you're passing a lot of people in the second half, which often happens because people go off too fast. Marathon session number 2, alternating efforts. So we're going to do 24 kilometers of total volume and we're going to do 2 kilometers on, 2 kilometers off, 2 kilometers on, 2 kilometers off. And so what we want to do there is we want to start at marathon pace for the first 2 kilometers. The next 2 kilometers at marathon pace plus 10%, the 10% slower than marathon pace, 4 minutes 24 in the 2:48 marathon example, and then get back to marathon pace. So you're going to do 6 rounds of essentially 4 kilometers, 2 kilometers at marathon pace, 2 kilometers at marathon pace plus 10%. What that's going to do is simulate surges in the marathon and simulate different efforts where maybe you've got to go uphill for a short time and maybe you can relax on a downhill, get your breathing under control, get your heart rate lowered, and then go again. It's a great session to do, and it's also a lot of fun to do that in a training schedule. Session number 3. Long intervals. Now this is one of my favorite sessions, builds a lot of confidence because you're spending a lot of time working at exactly marathon pace. We're gonna have short rests in between. They only need to be 60 seconds because it's a long interval and you're not pushing so hard into zone 4 or zone 5. It's all manageable for you. But we're gonna build up to 5 times 5 kilometers at marathon pace. So if you need to start at 3 times 5 kilometers at marathon pace with just 60 seconds rest in between, then move on to 4 times 5 kilometers at 20 kilometers at marathon pace is a brilliant session, and then move on to 5 times 5 kilometers with 60 seconds rest in between, as always. That's 25 kilometers worth of volume at marathon pace. Massive confidence boost. Training session number 4, broken tempo. Now this is a tough session and it takes a lot out of your body if executed well, but it will build a lot of confidence for race day, and it might even get you reconsidering what you're capable of on race day, which is exactly where we want to be. What this training session looks like is 24 kilometers of total volume, 3 kilometers at marathon pace, 1 kilometer at half marathon pace. So 3 kilometers at 4 minutes per kilometer, and then 1 kilometer at 3:45 or 3:50. You're going to do 6 rounds of those with no rest in between. So 3 on, 1 even faster at half marathon pace. What it's going to do is again give you those surges and give you that switch up in gear, but build a hell of a lot of confidence at you going way faster than marathon pace. But everything is relative to the way that you're going to move your body over the ground for a long period of time on race day. Session number 5, marathon hills. Now this has been my secret weapon for many years, and if you can get this right and you can execute it well, it's not only going to feel like 25 kilometers at marathon pace and marathon effort, it's also going to build some key areas of your marathon game that will really help you out in the second half of a marathon and definitely the final third. What you need to do is you need to find a hill, ideally a kilometer long, so that you can run up it, so 5 to 7%, so you can really push yourself but still be comfortable. You don't want it too steep, so it's taking too much out of the lower legs, especially the Achilles and the soleus. 5 to 7% is a nice gradient where you can really push yourself and also run down. If this has to be on a treadmill because you live in a very flat area, try to find a treadmill with easy to find the incline, not so easy to find the decline function, but try to find that. What this is going to look like is the first 5 kilometers at marathon pace. So we're getting very comfortable, we're getting very used to running at marathon pace in our long runs. Once we've found that rhythm, then after 5 kilometers, we're going to do kilometer repeats uphill. 5 kilometer repeats uphill at 5 to 7%, and we're pushing ourselves, but we're not going so much more beyond marathon paced effort. So get used to that effort that you're doing at marathon pace and then transfer that across to the uphill. So that's going to mean you slowing down. If you want to hit that half marathon effort or build up to half marathon effort, it's really going to help you. And it's essentially like a race. You might push it on the hill, knowing that if you're going uphill, there's likely to be a downhill that you can relax, get your breathing under control, and lower your heart rate. And then for the downhill, initially it might look like you just jogging downhill. And eventually what you'll start to do is keep the same rhythm, keep the same stride length, don't overstride so you're putting too much on your muscles. Get used to that downhill running. But what I want you to do is condition the quads, which is going to come in so useful for the second half of a marathon, definitely the final third, but usually the final 10 kilometers is where you see people with that dull ache in their quads because they've been using the same muscles repetitively for the last 35 kilometers. And now that dull ache has turned into pain and is either slowing them down or stopping them completely. Doesn't need to be like that. So that downhill running is just as important for your marathon if that's a flat marathon or if it's a hilly marathon. I see a lot of people training for something like Boston. They know they've got Heartbreak Hill to tackle, so they'll do a lot of uphill, but they're misjudging how much they've got to run downhill. So before the race has even started at the 10-mile point, the quads are already thrashed. You don't want that. This perfectly prepares you for this situation. And then the final 10 kilometers at marathon pace again. So first 5 kilometers, last 10 kilometers at marathon pace on the flat, marathon paced effort, and then 5 kilometers up, 5 kilometers down as kind of intervals in between. On the downhill, final point, you want to feel eventually like you're running. So you're definitely conditioning the quads. You also want to keep up with the pace that you're able to hold because you're getting that kind of for free. It's going to condition the quads, so you're going to get used to that, but recover. Focus on your breathing, focus on recovering. So when you hit a downhill in a race, that's your time to recover, but not to lose time. Now, the 2 final points I'll give you to absolutely optimize all of these runs and all of your marathon training, especially your long runs and your interval sessions, is you've got to warm up. You've got to give yourself the chance to get the most out of the training sessions. You've got to prime your body for that training session. And if this is a faster race-specific 25K or 24K long run, then you've got to be ready for that. So for me, what that will look like is between my warm up and cool down, about 3 to 5 kilometers. Try to warm up as quickly as I possibly can, just about 12 to 30 minutes. Walking to begin with, exactly as you would walk to the race start, a little bit of jogging, dynamic stretching, and then preparing the body with a few strides, elevating the heart rate so that initial 1-2 kilometers isn't a shock to the system. So important. And it's not going to just help you in the race, it's going to help you get the most out of all your training sessions. The second point is this is the perfect opportunity to practice your race day nutrition. So whatever that is, whatever you've got that as sports drink or gels, you're taking exactly that. So you're training your stomach along with your muscles and along with your aerobic system to handle that level of carbohydrate going into your stomach, but not just sloshing around, actually getting it to the muscles as energy. That, along with the hills, the downhills and the uphills, is what is going to make you run way faster in your marathon. But let me know in the comments below, and I will give the best comment one of these t-shirts, which is great. Wednesday intervals, Sunday long run, don't overcomplicate it. Let me know in the comments, what is your marathon time at the moment? And as a percentage, what are you trying to improve it as for your next marathon?